Hello, welcome to TB23. Today I'm going to be just kind of going, let me go ahead and get the big news out of the way. Apparently, and I don't see the mainstream media reporting on it, but a huge explosion occurred in a place called Homs, which is apparently in Syria. And apparently uh, there's a suspicion that it is Israel. And the nastiest part about this was that it was a chemical weapons, or likely to be a chemical weapons facility. And the casualties are massive, and it was obviously a sign of, like, well, probably just human rights violation to do such a thing. But of course their argument's going to be, I mean, it's like the most basic Israeli tactic, which is preemptively, um, brashly doing something out of this justification of it can be done kind of thing, which is for some reason the justification, like, oh, we have like whatever, over 1,000 nuclear warheads. You can't have one. If you start to have one, we're going to nuke you. So it's just obviously it's problematic that they would do that. I guess I'll kind of go ahead and just read what's on the news for that event. Matt Disclosed.tv, I guess, did a piece, says 2 explosions targeting Syrian regime's ammunition depot went off in predominantly Alawite district in Homs on Thursday. I don't know. Massive attacks on Homs, death toll rising in Israel suspected. I said trying to figure out if that explosion released a bunch of weaponized vapors. And I'm like, yep, looks like a controversy. This person, Rachel 3108, is making the post. She's apparently looking into Syrian news outlets, Arab news outlets, and she writes the following. I have no link for these reports, but they come from Arab news. Headline, FSA, which is the Free Syrian Army, which are the rebels, claims missiles were hit in the attack. It's pretty odd. Okay, so you've already got the rebels backing up the attack. Claim missiles were hit in the attack, not weaponized chemical vapors or anything like that. The rebels claim that chemical weapons were hit. I'm getting confused now. Anyway, I'll just read it. Rebels claim that chemical weapons were hit, causing the Syrian authorities to evacuate residents living within 300 feet of the warehouses due to concern that they could be affected. I need to look up the Free Syrian Army real quick. Free Syrian Army. I guess the Free Syrian Army is synonymous with the rebels, so I'm just making sure that I'm not getting that wrong somehow. Okay, so you have the rebels, the Free Syrian Army, claiming missiles were hit in the attack. That could be consistent with rebels claim that chemical weapons were hit, causing the Syrian authorities to evacuate residents living within 300 feet of the warehouse. Excuse me, buddy. Warehouses due to concern that they could be affected. Reports of large number of casualties due to poisonous gases released by chemical weapons that were in weapon storehouses in the Wadi Aidhab in the area of Homs. Last report is 138 killed. Now that figure increases. Same poster says, eyewitnesses reporting the area looks like it was hit by a nuclear bomb or massive earthquake. Reports of over 500 killed and many others burned in the debris. Yeah, so, either a massive explosion, I don't know how many, whatever tons of explosives requires an earthquake, but we all know that the nuclear bombs, small tactical nuclear bombs, whatever, will cause earthquakes. Uh, Reports of over 500 killed and many others buried in the debris. Horrible, horrible. Why? Because it's like chemical weapons, right? It's like, so it's no longer, like, let's say there was a chemical weapons, and if all of a sudden they got used on the people of Syria, which would have happened in the attack, essentially, now it's like whoever attacked it is the one that actually used it on the people, basically. Why? Because they're worried about, say, their own people getting used on. And it's like, well, what are you going to do? Like, if we start disagreeing with you, Israel, supposedly, are you going to come over here and just start blowing us up? You know what I mean? Like, people can be able to disagree with you, you know. So, let's see. I mean, that has to happen. If people can't disagree with you, you got a problem. You know, you probably should, you know, maybe think about getting out of such a volatile situation. Let's see. Quote: two enormous explosions targeting Syrian regime ammunitions depots. This is coming from SyriaDirect.org. Went off in a predominantly Alawite district in Homs on Thursday, with hundreds estimated dead due to chemical weapons believed to be stored there. Now let me take a look at what Alawite is real quick. Mystical religious group in Syria. I think the Twelvers are Shia. Let me look. Hold on. Alawites have been long persecuted for their beliefs by Sunnis. Oh, boom. So they're Shias. And that's important because there's basically an alliance or co-opting, essentially, of the Sunnis by the Israelis. And you can see that the attack, and, you know, Iran and Assad are Shias, and the Al-Qaeda and the Obama-backed rebels and all that are Sunnis, Sunni, Shia, and if you're on, you know, my side of the table, you're going to be backing the Shias, basically. I don't like subscribing to things, but if me and you are like, you know, you think that there's like a Zionist problem, you're going to be for the Shias because they're not quite as controlled or co-opted by the Israelis. It doesn't mean that the Sunnis are bad in and of themselves. I don't know. But what it does mean is that you basically like have to watch out for anything Wahhabi, Al-Qaeda, Sunni, and essentially you don't have to champion the Shias, but at the same time it's kind of like you have to understand that the Shias are the target. So the blasts in Wadi al-Dahab at 2 p.m. local time were captured on video, with the second generating a fireball followed by a mushroom-shaped cloud. Plumes of smoke were clearly visible throughout Syria's largest city. Okay, Rachel, the poster, writes again, holy crap, Arab reports. Homs rebel command reporting on what's happening in the Alawite neighborhood of Al-Nazat. Gas masks are being distributed to families who live in the area of the explosion. Authorities sent alerts to the public not to touch objects that were dispersed due to the explosion. Authorities have begun to move women and children who live in the area to another region. On the streets of the area of the explosion, there are missiles that were dispersed from the explosion at the warehouse but did not explode. A message was sent to evacuate residents anywhere where there is an unexploded missile due to the danger. There are some reports these missiles contain chemical agents. This is like causing a human rights violation because there could possibly be later a human rights violation. This is just totally insanely bad what they've done, basically. Okay. I don't know if we thoroughly covered that, you know. I could probably go through a little bit more. to you know, uncover some more information there. Oh, I'm going to go ahead and bring up the thing so I can see your comments. Oh, what's going on? Cancel, cancel, cancel. Okay, mute the sound. Ready to watch your comments in the event that you do comment anything. Okay, now that's really big news. That's gonna, I hope the mainstream media covers it. Now, if they don't cover it, it's gonna be bad, because what it's gonna show is like a negligence towards the Shias, towards the atrocities committed by Israel or the rebels or Israel in support of the rebels against Assad. It will basically be telling, or have they covered it yet? I haven't seen it. I have not seen it. It's kind of interesting how Fox is championing the resistance against Obama. CNN still seems to be diverting and stuff, and Anyway, let's see. So, kind of cool that basically there's this rumor about the sun being blown apart, and that was apparently fake, and suspicious observers says that's an old picture, and that's just a trick, basically. It's not even, it's like with some kind of a setting, and that there was no sun being blown up or anything like that. Now, I'll segue that into something that's been bothering me. I've been kind of getting bothered by something like the sublime of the universe, and it's trying to solve essentially extremely strange philosophical questions, metaphysical questions, and it's odd how I'm starting to jump into that, because that was the very thing that basically just had me so worried. And I basically found out that there's a pretty good chance that the universe is some sort of a fractal, also known as a hologram, but really some kind of what's called, what's that called? A cellular automata. I'll go ahead and show you what a cellular automata looks like. Cellular automata. And this gets into like the nature of functions and math and stuff like that. Cellular automaton. And that's the glider gun. Essentially what's going on is there's these rules for proceeding states. And what do we see in the universe? We see, apparently the progression of time, So basically the rules are like, you have like a grid of squares, and if there's something, like if there's like three squares filled in, another cell gets created. If there's a cell all by itself or just two squares, they go away. It basically turns into this something like an organic structure, and that's why the person that basically created one of the first rules is called it the game of life. Conway, I think his name's John Conway. Let's take a look and see if I remember things correctly. Anyway, it shows that you can actually, this is what makes it unique. You can run, it's Turing complete, which means that you can run computations. You can basically build a computer out of this process. So you can actually do computations within this computation, basically. Conway. Is his name John? Yes, his name is John Conway. Now that's really important, because this is like this implies like fractal theory, etc. And what's really, I think, telling, or what needs to be said, is that these are all, this is basically a math problem working out. And that's significant because, you know, let's say you have like an expression 5 minus 2 equals 3, which is basically some sort of a function like f of x equals y, you know, which would be f of minus 3, or f minus 3 of 3, or no, whatever. Basically, 5 minus 3 equals 2, you know. And I used to say to people, like, you know, the x doesn't exist in f of x equals y. The only thing that exists is y. So y is identical to f of x. X is just used as the expression of y. And what I'm trying to say here is that previous states are basically illusions. Previous state, like later on, I imagine that people will find these sort of things interesting to like listen to. Anyway, I'm just going to go ahead and say it for the record. Previous states of the universe are basically illusions, and you know, basically, you know, how do I say this? Part of a process which leads to the actual function or the actual value. And so the universe that you see is basically something like that, like an illusion which helps you to come to the actual thing, the actual value which exists, which is existing right now. And yeah, 5 minus 3, 5 minus 2 equals 3. 3 is what exists. 5 minus 2 is the expression of 3. That's what the equal sign means. It identifies. 5 minus 2 identifies as 3. Is there ever 5? You know, in some ways, no. In fact, 5 is actually just like if all this is weird to say, but if all you have is 3, you might be able to express your 3 with 5 minus 2, but at no point do you have 5. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes any sense, but later on, these sort of things will become very useful to people to understand. So I think that the macrocosm and the microcosm, which are both basically just a bunch of empty space, like even, you know, this is all just a bunch of empty space, and all of that's just a bunch of empty space, is in reality substratum of the phenomena that you see, which is more or less just simple. The universe is used to sort of facilitate things like the experience of love. This is like the strong anthropic principle, basically. We basically live in the most stable setup, you know, for facilitating this life that you see. And then you might ask, well, what's the point? Well, you get to experience, you know, what it's like to feel fun or have love, or it's basically a game. You're in a game which is leading you to some sort of a grand understanding, take your pick, God or yourself or something like that. And so when it basically boils down to it, things are ultimately simple. Things are ultimately pleasant to the mind to think about. Things are ultimately dramatic. Things are ultimately, you know, neither optimistic nor pessimistic, leaning towards optimism, but more, I tend to think that things end up being sort of ironic or dramatic. Like what matters is the story. Does that make sense? What matters is the story. Okay. Can you prank call someone, please? You would make me so happy if you did that. Are you suggesting that you will give me a phone number to prank call somebody? Because you asked me that. You did ask me that the last time I was on air, and that was interesting to me. I don't know why you want me to prank call someone. All right. So let's see. What else? That's right. We have to. Okay. This is really important. Okay. You guys have to understand this. Our president and the current standing regime are really bad people. They're on the bad guys' team, okay? And luckily, there is a resistance. And I need to tell you something. The people that are on the bad guys' team on Obama's side, these are all people who are just not politically conscious, not politically aware. And you are like basically authorized to do whatever it is in your legal means to get people to wake up. And really, and I know it's hard because there's no monetary return. I mean, like, your return is going to be like, you're not going to suffer under this regime during this last stand of the bad guys, basically. Okay, so it's so important that you do what it takes to wake people up, because if there is a ton of resistance, like in a very short time period, then we're going to, you know, as was always the case, but now it's becoming very, very important to do what it takes to wake people up. And like I said, I know that there's very little monetary return, so I suppose who I am speaking to are all those persons. And unfortunately, I feel like a lot of persons that have money kind of are already woken up, and they just don't know what to do or what to do with it, basically. But, you know, here's some ideas. You know, some ideas are going to be the college campuses. This fall, it is going to be of the utmost importance to start up clubs, have public debates, really kind of hammer home, and, you know, take your pick. If you want to go after the Illuminati, you can do it. If you want to go after the Masons, but I'm kind of like weird about that now. I'm kind of like, there's a corrupted aspect of the Masonry, a corrupted aspect of the Illuminati. And I say this because sometimes I wonder if some of the resistance that you're seeing is coming from the legit aspects of, say, the Masonry or Illuminati. I don't know. But what do I have to indicate, essentially, that I may be right about that? Okay, well, there's this man named Pike. And see, they may even still believe these things, so, you know, I don't know what was before the corruption or whatever, but I'll just go ahead and show you what it honestly looks like to me has happened or is going on. If you'll give me but a moment. I said here, I'm sure that, you know, I don't know if it's classified information, but I'm not somebody that knows anything, so I'm just going to go and say it. I said, I'm sure that radiation, you know, because people are starting to wonder, like, well, what is the world going to be like if we win, so to speak? And I think if you, like, because there's been so much technology suppressed, like, even before the creation of the atomic bomb, that I'm almost certain that things will basically play itself out in a smooth, easy way in the event that they remove the technological suppression aspect of things. So I said, I'm sure that radiation and or gravity detection, because fissile material is extremely dense, it's very heavy, it should produce some sort of noticeable gravity and gravitational, like, impact on, say, gravity detection equipment, has been developed for detecting fissile material even under great depths of Earth. Neutrinos, for instance, are so pervasive they pass straight through the entire Earth, hard to detect, but there must be some sort of intermediary or similar pervasiveness. I imagine this detection ability is suppressed and done so in order to maintain the illusion of needing to upkeep the centralized police state. A great many things which appear difficult to solve for decentralization will be solved once we rid ourselves of technological suppression. So, you know, problems like, will the free market work? Why aren't there any jobs? And it's kind of like, well, it's quite possible that if you because the one concern could be the volatility of the public. So you have to like the steps are like this. You have to like educate the public on rational thinking. Possibly not even that. You have to fix the people in power first. Okay. Then you have to educate the public so that they're not like literally like brain-eating zombies. Okay, because you don't want to just give a bunch of brain-eating zombies a bunch of power. Understand that? So you fix the people in power. You fix the brain-eating zombie-like state of everybody. You can do that through whatever, like educating them on the nature of the problem, or philosophical training. You know, leave those aside. Then you free up the market, which means that everybody becomes empowered, basically. And then it will be quite clear the amount of say usefulness of people, because you have to understand we're under like multiple centuries of social engineering, and social engineering and suppression and just raw hatred of humanity, and we live in an exciting time because uh, things are occurring which appears to enable the freeing of humanity from the vicious grip of monopoly. Isn't it weird that they call anti-monopoly laws antitrust laws? It's like, I haven't even looked into why they do that, but I can already tell right off the bat. It's kind of like they're making it sound like bad to have no monopolies or something like that. It's like, oh, you got that guy in the antitrust law. I don't know, it's weird. Anyway, beautiful picture, says the only way out is in. And that's really important, okay? Like, what you are is this, you know, you don't want to get too esoteric or whatever, because then you kind of get in this trap, which is like you don't solve anything. But I think a lot of what's happening, like what may have begun as a disinformation campaign to make people think that they can change the world through changing themselves, which I heard somebody say that recently. I think it was on Joy Camp or whatever. And I could see that being the case because it pacifies you. But I would say that a lot of the interesting things you see happening actually has to do with a successful attempt at, say, coming to understand ourselves, or coming to understand how to control our own dispositions, and in a way affecting dispositions of other people. Because, you know, people were just very self-unaware prior to the need to become extremely self-aware. So, okay. Or die, basically. So, let's see. I said... okay, there's this guy named Albert Pike. Well, I may as well just read it out for you so that it's on record. Albert Pike, apparently a Grand Master Mason. And let's just say that the Protocols of Learned Elders of Zion basically said that the Zionists were infiltrating the Masonic lodges and corrupting them. So is this a product of that? I don't know. But it sure does look like it. He says the First World War will be brought about in order to permit the Illuminati to overthrow the power of the Tsars in Russia, and making that country a fortress of atheistic communism. This is in 1871. Okay? He's apparently writing a letter to a person named Mazzini. The divergences caused by the agents of the Illuminati between the British and the Germanic empires let's read this real quick. Oh, let's talk about the timing. I mean, yeah, um, the timing actually of the say bomb that just went out, the bomb that went off in Homs is like immediately preceding the John Kerry going over there to talk about peace talks between the Israelis and the Palestinians. So if the Israelis attacked right after the peace talks, that's another sign that the Israelis are just wild, out of control individuals. So, you know, I mean, let's just go back to why basically we have such a monolithic problem with the Zionists. Because it's very easy to co-opt, I don't know, maybe even Muslims, but Christians certainly. It's kind of like, even though like the Christians of antiquity would never have dreamed of such a thing. Apparently, with all of the scandals that occurred with the Jews in their countries sacrificing humans and stuff like that, so they would have been like, "Oh, that sounds like a really bad thing." You know, they would have wanted the Holy Land for the Christians, basically. So, anyway, for some reason, Christians are like, wait, Israel? I think I've heard of Israel as being a good guy in the Bible before. A bunch of people that just have no, clue about that. Anyway, it's very interesting how the Crusades are, to this day, being played out, essentially. And there's no winner. The way you win is presumably to let God do, I mean, like, wouldn't that be nice? Like, you just not conspire and you let God do you let God bring about the Messiah. You let God uh, fulfill the prophecies, and or maybe like if you're like this on this anti-God sort of philosophy, then I don't know. It just doesn't make sense for human involvement. I don't know. Whatever. I don't want to have to argue theological stuff. Let's see. The First World War must be brought about in order to permit the Illuminati to overthrow the power of czars in Russia. Communism will be built and used in order to destroy the other governments and in order to weaken the religions. So here they're talking about the First World War that ends up, coinciding with the rise of the Bolsheviks in Russia. And they had like this atheist sort of slant. And but hey, who were the Bolsheviks? Well, they were basically a Jewish mafia. So Jewish were they that if you were found, after they took power, if you were found guilty of anti-Semitism, the charge or the penalty was death. Okay, so they massacred the Christians and they massacred the Russians and they massacred the Tsar there. And you can basically understand why, when you have this being said, that the Tsar would put out the protocols of the learned elders of Zion, and then he would get murdered. You know what I'm saying? So let's see, the Second World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences between the fascists and the political Zionists. This is so important, okay? Because here they're talking about Zion, and Israel isn't even around. The war must be brought about so that Nazism is destroyed and that the political Zionism be strong enough to institute a sovereign state of Israel in Palestine. During the Second World War, international communism must become strong enough in order to balance Christendom, which would be then restrained and held in check until the time when we need it. So in other words, what they're doing is they're infiltrating the Masonic lodges. They're getting them to believe that Lucifer is the deity that they all profess to believe in. That may have even been the case. Like ancient Gnostic texts suggest that ancient Gnostic Christianity held the snake of the Garden of Eden, who brought the knowledge of good and evil to Adam and Eve, and that the Old Testament God was basically evil, a blind god, the Yaldabaoth, or the demiurge, who essentially was tricking all of us God beings into states of servitude to him, and it was not in our nature. Therefore, the Satan figure, the snake or the tempter or whatever, was a good guy. This is entirely possible. But here what you see is a possible trick. In other words, they were trying to get them to think that they needed to create Zion in order to destroy Zion, in order to prove Luciferianism was the ultimate truth. Anyway, you'll see that soon. Anyway, look at how it says. This is 1871, long before the Nazis. Brought about so that Nazism is destroyed and the political Zionism be strong enough to institute a sovereign state of Israel and Palestine. During the Second World War, international communism must become strong enough in order to balance Christendom. Okay. So you have Jews taking over Russia. That's the First World War. In the Second World War, you have Jews taking over Israel. Taking over Palestine to become Israel. And then attacking all the enemies that would ever oppose the Jews or Israel through the vilification of Nazism. That is so important, okay? Because who's benefiting from all of this? Now they tempt them. The Third World War must be fomented by taking advantage of differences caused by the Illuminati and the political Zionists and the leaders of the Islamic world. So they're turning the Zionists, now they're turning the State of Israel against the Islamic world. War should be conducted in such a way that Islam, the Muslim Arabic world, and political Zionism, the State of Israel, mutually destroy each other. Meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided on the issue, will be constrained to fight. Then there's a big old war where everyone's going to die, and this is before nuclear bombs, so obviously there's a bit more, the plan is like operating under this assumption there's no such thing. Anyway, you have to understand the piggybacking, and then it ends up going Christianity and Islam and atheism and Zionism, they'll all fight and destroy each other, and then there's the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer brought to public view. Manifestation will result from the general reactionary movement, which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time. Quite interesting, this may actually be occurring, basically. So, if it's true that what we see coming to resist the actual problem, let's say that this was an operation to co-opt the Masons, to create Israel and destroy its enemies, which I think it was. Anyway, they attempted to say that eventually that problem would be solved by the Luciferian sort of doctrine, and I don't like calling that because it's basically bad PR. You've got a lot of Christians and Muslims and whatever that'll be like abhorred by the idea, and I am not of that opinion. I am not of the opinion to even call it that. However, it is somewhat odd that we are having to do things similar to the Gnostic texts, such as waking up to the fact that the Old Testament God is this God that's blinding us, and that Jesus and the Holy Spirit are actually, say, agents of the real pantheon, or the real God, who is trying to wake us up from the slumber of the old God of the Old Testament, who is the blind God, who, because people did notice, even early writers said, hey, there's a difference between this Father that Jesus is speaking about and this tribal God that was merciless, basically. Baseball Smasher says, I don't know, just bored. Have you ever read Bill Bryson's book, A Short History of Nearly Everything? No, I have not. I have not. Tell me about that. So anyway, was Masonry corrupted? Sure. Almost certainly. I mean, it's actually right there in the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. And was the Catholic Church corrupted? Was the Jesuits and et cetera, et cetera? Yeah. And why would they be good at it? Well, let me just read some of the stuff that comes straight out of the Talmud, and guess what? That website is down. I can't look at that website now. But it's basically like, they have, like, I don't like calling them Jews because it's so associated with a race, or a so-called race. And I would rather call them the rabbis, because essentially, or the Pharisees. Yeah, like, here, I'll show you that. Isn't that interesting? It's so interesting. Pharisaism. It's coming right off of Wikipedia. The Pharisees. And everyone knows that Jesus was heavily opposed to the Pharisees. In Judaism, Pharisees were at various times a political party, a social movement, a school of thought among Jews during the Second Temple period, beginning under the Hasmonean dynasty 140 to 137 BC, or no, 140 to 37 BCE, in the wake of the Maccabean revolt. Okay, after the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE, Pharisaic beliefs became the liturgical and ritualistic basis for rabbinic Judaism. Okay, basically Judaism, which ultimately produced the normative traditional Judaism, which is the basis for all contemporary forms of Judaism except for Karaite Judaism. Even you're going to fall down. All right. So, Christian traditions have been a cause of widespread awareness of the Pharisees, because Jesus dealt with the Pharisees so often as being called quite literally the sons of the devil himself. So, what were they doing back there? What sort of practices were occurring amongst them? He spoke of them as though they held keys, like there may have been Kabbalah at that time. They held keys to the truth, but were withholding them from the people, and like basically bad. They were like bad guys, basically. So very odd that such a belief system would become so virulent, and such a comprised of such a monolithic, like, terrible entity, that it would give rise to a sort of struggle. And you might even say, I think it's at one point, maybe in the 1600s, they thought, let's make the world so bad that it necessitates the return of God or the return of the Messiah. And so, the argument could always be made. Basically what I don't like to do is to make somebody feel like they need to commit suicide. So what I do is I say, hey, the reason you're alive even is so that you can start serving good. Does that make sense? I mean, like, it doesn't matter. Basically, that's the tenets of Christianity. It doesn't matter what you did in your past. You have to start doing good. You need to be worried about your afterlife, basically. You need to do good. And obviously there's always time for redemption. So that's important. So I said, okay, we're coming up at the end of the hour. Let's see, I said, I wish I knew who to attack. It's absolutely clear that you can attack the Jewish supremacy global slave state, Zionist conspiracy of an Israeli empire. That was definitely, clearly happening. I mean, that is simply safe to attack, but to what end? Obviously, it coincides with decentralization, sovereignty, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so, I mean, you definitely don't want a empire ruled by a supposed race of people who have an agenda of getting off on killing you and destroying you. That would be bad. That would probably be the height of evil. So that's why you would want to oppose something generally known as Zionism. Does that mean that you're a bad guy or that you're not a Christian or whatever, and that they're using terms like Jew, Zion, Israel, things that you've grown up that you're supposed to like? No. And in fact, I think most theologians would argue that Jesus is that covenant which is with all of man. So, like, the entire, I guess you could say, purpose of Jesus was to make all of humanity, including those people that call themselves Jews, aware that they're children of the Almighty God. Zion and Israel and Christian and Jesus and Islamic, whatever, all inside of us now, okay? Not on some section of desert. It's all inside of us. Not on some DNA sequence. All inside of us. Makes me want to cry, basically. It's very sweet. So obvious. It's so obvious what is good and what is bad. And let's go ahead and just continue here. Oh yeah, it looks like there's like a switching of reliance away from the Sunni Saudis for their oil. You know, so what was apparently making them so powerful was that there was all the oil was coming out of Saudi Arabia, and now it's like, oh, we found a bunch of oil in Australia and something else. Let's take a look, huh? And then the prince is getting mad, and they're worried about their I need to say something, like, this stuff is extraordinarily volatile. Things need to be taken, like, as much as you want them to go fast, some of these people can't be reasoned with, okay? And you have to, like, go slow. And you have to go slow because, in essence, you kind of want to give them the chance to turn around, because that's the easiest way. But you also need to go slow, in essence, because you don't want them to freak out and do bad things to good people, right? So you have to go slow. Damage control. In the meanwhile, just wake the Americans up to whatever you want. The Illuminati or whatever, you know. So, all right, let's see. Because that's the most attractive thing. It's kind of boring, you know. It's kind of boring to be like the Saudis and, you know, Netanyahu and all that stuff, or, you know, because some people need to hear that. Some people are very level-headed, and that's what they want to hear. And then other people they want to hear the metaphysical stuff. They want to hear that it either correlates to their, you know, religious beliefs, or it's like they want to be like, this is scary. This is scary, and so because it's scary, it's bad, and because it's bad, I need to oppose it, and I can be a hero. Like, they think in a more metaphysical way. And so these are the kind of people that you need to tempt them into waking up by saying, this is a, you know, this is a attack against the eye of the pyramid and stuff like that, you know. So there's plenty of mosquitoes up here. Thank God I'm coming up on the hour. Let's see. Sounds like they put in this woman. I don't know what to say about this person for running the Department of Homeland Security. And you know, maybe I don't know. Maybe she's a good sign. Maybe she's a bad sign. I don't know. But from what she said in the past, controversial remarks. Unless she's changed her mind, I don't see her being a very good DHS person. Find it interesting. She's African American, and when you factor in that Obama has a Holder, and I don't even know if Holder's doing the same thing he's doing anymore. And this person, there could be essentially, I don't know. It's very odd. Like they need. I wish they would just forget it. I don't know if Justin Bieber's gay. Apparently he was spitting on his supporters, like girls down there. It's like, dude, you're so gay, bro. Like, bring the girls up in your room rather than spitting on them and laughing. It's like, that's really gay. I mean, I don't know how to say that. Let's see. Operation blows back. It's repurposed. I'm sorry, I'm just kind of going down my wall and looking at what might be interesting to talk about. Noam Chomsky, actually, you know, I have to give Noam Chomsky credit. I mean, he may be operating under a knowledge that he can't go into conspiracy theory mode. Nevertheless, does he cause blowback? Yes, here's an example. He says, Israel uses sophisticated attack jets and naval vessels to bomb densely crowded refugee camps, schools, apartment blocks, mosques, and slums to attack a population that has no air force, no air defense, no navy, no heavy weapons, no artillery units, no mechanized armor, no command and control, no army, and calls it war. It's not war, it's murder. Chomsky. So it is quite terrible PR that the Israelis would even have the Palestinians. So basically, they did basically do a lot of muscling out of the Palestinians to the point of just painful apartheid state racism. And now there's like these refugee camp basically places totally disconnected from each other that we call Palestine. And they can't even like bring in imports and stuff like that. It's absolutely terrible. I don't know. It's so weird that these people are surviving under these conditions, you know. But they're nomadic desert dwellers, and I guess they're used to such terrible conditions. I don't know. Bad to say that, but you know. Anyway, did a lot of them try to like leave? Yes. I'm sure Israel would have loved that. It's weird that Israel. Why doesn't Israel or the Zionist state like incentivize them? Maybe they did, and maybe a lot of them just did not want to go. They didn't like leaving Palestine, so that ended up leaving a lot of people there. Anyway, would Israel have stopped it at the ownership of the Palestinian lands? No, they would have expanded. They had all these they had all of these ambitions to expand past that. In a way, they may have thought that their relationship with the Palestinians was somehow a way of maintaining the sympathy of the rest of the world and a way of needing anti-terror sort of stuff going on in the rest of the world, coinciding with police state agendas. Let's see. This is a quote, and I have to say this. It's like, You know, some people they bitch out whenever it comes to relationships with people. So there's a quote that says, "A strong man can handle a strong woman. A weak man will say she has an attitude." But that's the same thing with like roommates or people that you're around. Like you don't want to, you just want to level with people. You know what I mean? Like most people can be converted to friends, and if you're a good person, you can do that. Some people can't. It's not unheard of. But what I will say is it's neat to see that there may be a move to like bring back tough women, because when Paris Hilton came out, like I remember how weird that was when the girls were afraid to like rake on this farm. It was something back in 2002 or 3, and then all of a sudden, like all of these really good, hot, even country, but not even like just like tough girls thought like, oh my gosh, I'm a butch, or I'm not going to be attractive by being not, or by not, I need to basically be this little poodle pet in a purse of a strong guy, a strong male, or something like that. And they turn into hardcore, bitches. They basically got off on, being mean to men and not being like, they were always dipping out, being afraid of them. And it really psyched men out. Like men basically went from being kind of like cool to like, oh my God, I suck real bad, and it caused men to basically get worse, which is why I like really encourage women to like, you don't have to be strong. You don't have to think that you can take guys. You can't, most of the time. What you can do is pack some heat, and if you pack some heat, then at least you can be like, I'm going to say what I want to you, and I'm going to treat you like with respect. And if you try anything, I'm going to kill you. You know what I mean? Like that's the point of the Second Amendment, right? Well, at least that's what the Second Amendment allows you to do. And so, you want your straight shooting. I don't pay too much attention to it. Most people don't. It's already on the rise. But at least they're getting away from this like uber disconnected, let them eat cake sort of mentality that women were having. And I really just don't even know how to describe it. But they were clearly being socially engineered against men, against the general American male population, which would mean white men, basically. And that's not so much now, but very much so in the early 2000s to the mid 2000s, and lingers to this moment. There was a clear weaponization of the women against the men, and it's just terrible. I mean, when people really kind of like understand what was occurring to the Americans, right? What was occurring to the Americans, it'll be like, it'll be like, oh wait, you guys were slaves and you were being like mentally tortured, basically, because most of this is operating under the dumbing down of the American people, or the disinforming of the American people. To such an extent, we have like all of these wars that we have no clue as to why we were fighting them, etc., etc. Very good night to everybody. I think I'm up on the hour. TB23 out. I'll see you. Well, I might not see you tomorrow, but I might see you the next day, okay? All right, take it easy.